Welcome to the Salt Grain. I am your host, Holly McNamara, and my guest today, you already know by the title, is my boyfriend, Daniel Smith. We call him Dan.
Daniel.
That's bullshit. I hope this sounds okay because I hear an echo. It's bothering me. Anyway, hope everyone's good. The idea for this episode, everyone's like, why are you interviewing your boyfriend?
Lots to say.
Yes. So the idea behind interviewing my boyfriend is, as you probably have gathered from my podcast, if you don't know me yet, I was a political figure, elected official for 5 years. And there's a whole story leading up to it. And I made the decision right after Dan and I started dating. And it has changed our lives for the better, for the worse, really for the better, I think. But it's been, I think it's just an interesting story to begin with. But I think that, for any listener, but I think a lot of people that want to run for office have a significant other, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, etc. And they're worried, is this going to affect me? How is it going to affect my family? Some people get divorced over it. And so.
She was close.
What? What did you say?
I said she was close.
Oh, yeah. We're not married, so I don't know how that's possible. So I thought this would be both fun, entertaining. Well, there's more than two, so it would be fun, not both, but all fun, entertaining, and informative. So I'm putting Dan in the hot seat because I love doing that. So, Dan.
Yes.
I'm going to start by leading up to when I met you. And then you can go into leading up how you met me. And the reason why this is so important is because it really just paints the full picture of where we were coming from in our lives and how crazy politics has made our lives and our relationship. So I think, most people would be, maybe some people wouldn't be surprised, but I think most people would be surprised that we're still together. Right. For many reasons. Mm-hmm. So I want to get to paint the picture for everyone as to how we met and kind of how things transpired over the years and just tell you some stories. So Dan and I actually went to high school, but we really we knew of each other, but we weren't friends. He was a senior, I was a freshman. He was that hockey player that everyone thought was hot. But untouchable because I was so young. And before Dan and I met, it was right before I moved home. We met right after I moved home, but right before I moved home, I was living on the West Coast. I kind of described this in my first episode. I'm going to paint more of the picture. I was living out west. I lived mostly in San Diego, 11 years in San Diego, 2 years in Vegas, and then a year in San Francisco, all three of which are completely different communities, completely different people, completely different everything. But the common theme in all three cities, really big cities, was dating sucked. But I had fun. I had a blast. And it was my 20s and my 30s, early 30s. And I was like, you know what? I'm having a blast. This is a time of my life. I was single. I was fine with it. I went on dates if I wanted to. I didn't if I didn't want to. I just did whatever I wanted for a very long time. And I was actually really happy single. I was fine with it. And, I have a lot of single moms that are friends of mine, and I admire them. And, they always worked hard and they managed to enjoy themselves and have fun at times. So, I was living this spring break type life while doing really, important work, engineering and construction, but I was having a blast. And I decided in San Francisco, and I finally made my way up to San Francisco. After a year there, I'm like, what am I doing? What the fuck am I doing with my life? Now, my life was amazing. Like, I had everything I needed or wanted. I had a great job, like all different types of jobs, most of which were in my field. But I took a break and like went off into did a book tour, and then I worked for a startup in San Francisco, and it was such a different ecosystem. But anyway, I had a I traveled all the time. I had people over the country, like friends, and I loved my life. But there came a time where I'm like, I think I need to move home. I woke up one day, I was reading Twitter, I read a story about a friend of mine who stepped down as CEO of his startup in Boston. And he wanted to step down and become a board member. And so he was like taking less of the burden of, running the company. And it was very inspiring. And I remember waking up in my San Francisco with the Bay Bridge view apartment, gorgeous. Wake up to the view of it and the sunrise, and I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I was so inspired by my friend's story, and I got this overwhelming sense of calmness when I thought about moving home. I forget I'm on camera, so I'm like talking to the microphone. So I just decided that minute it was time. I was done. My lease was coming up. I just had to get home, and I hadn't met anyone that I could take seriously because it was like spring break all the time. I had a wonderful set of friends, but everyone moves and leaves. And a lot of the people that I dated, it wasn't serious. And that had been like 14 years I was single for the most part. So, and I, again, fine with it. So I woke up that day and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I have to settle down. I was 35, I think, 34, and no, 35. So I just like, screw it. I'm moving home. And I called my sister and I'm like, Emily, I'm coming home. And she's like, what? Why now? So we booked her flight. She flew across the country. She drove me home. We had the trip of our lives. We had such an amazing time. We spent time visiting friends and family across the country. I get home. Now, story for another podcast, but I was done. I had been going Mach 10 for 14 years. Yeah, it was 14 years because I moved to San Diego in 1999. So, and it partied and worked my ass off, but partied hard too. And I'm like, I gotta get home. So, and I got screwed over. Like, there was some real bad shit that happened that was traumatizing. Again, story for a different podcast. Some really bad shit. And I was like, I'm done. I just want to go back to my roots. I want to go back to a construction or engineering job. That's where I'm comfortable. Like, I need to be stable and plant roots. And I just felt it in my bones. So anyway, Emily moves me home in March of 2013. I got a job 2 weeks later, right after the Boston bombings. I'm sitting at my kitchen table and Emily's like, because we were going to go to the marathon. And I was like, no, I got to look for a job. I can't. I have too much to do. So Emily and I decided not to go. Thank God. And then there were the bombings, and it was so shocking. So that was just so overwhelming, being so close. And then they Zarnaev, I think his name, came to UMass Dartmouth. He was down there. There were helicopters everywhere. It was a police chase. And my mom's like going out to the grocery store, and Emily and I were just like, oh my God. So, but anyway, I was home and I was like, oh my God, I am never leaving. I am never leaving my home and my family ever anymore. Like, I've had my fun. The bombings happened, and I was like, I just can't leave anymore. There have been too many, a lot of the elderly, family members, cousins, uncles, aunts, had passed away while I lived away. And that was just heartbreaking. It was so hard being so far away from that. And so, when the bombings happened, I was like, okay, that's enough. Like, I can't be away. So, it hit literally close to home, figuratively and literally. And luckily, not luckily, but the serendipitously, my soon-to-be boss was locked in the room with my friend from HR at Boston Medical Center. And I had kind of interviewed with them. It was like a soft interview. They didn't really have any positions, but they interviewed me anyway. And the HR friend and my soon-to-be boss were locked in the command and control center at Boston Medical Center because they were a first responder to the bombings. So they were locked in there on the lockdown. And they were like, okay, are we going to hire Holly? So they were forced to have the conversation quicker than they normally would. They were sitting in there all day. And so they created a position for me, and I started my job at BMC. It was phenomenal. I loved working there. I loved it. They just didn't pay me that well. I couldn't stay. But still love them, and miss them. So shout out to them. Yay, Boston Medical Center. And I had been at my job, living with my mom. I was in hibernation mode. I was driving to work 4 hours a day. I was exhausted. I had just had my 14-year crazy Holly McNamara country tour, and I was home, like, recovering. I was usually like the social butterfly, and when I moved home, I'm like, nope, I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to make any plans. And if you know me, like, that is not me. So I was just like, Mom, I need to be mothered back to health. And so that's what I did. I just stayed home. I took care of myself. I stayed with my mom. I just wanted to be with my mom and my dog at the time, Kiwi. And that ties into my relationship with Dan. I'm getting there, I promise. So Emily and I, my sister, I had told my mom, I'm like, you know what? I really want to be more involved in town. So usually I manifest what I ask for, and it usually ends up being the most extreme version of what I ask for. Like, I remember one day I was like, oh, I wish I could party in Vegas. Like, this is kind of boring. Like, I won't get into who I went with because it's fine. It was nice, but I was kind of like, I was 22, I was bored, and I wanted to party in Vegas. Well, I got what I asked for. But anyway, I wanted to get more involved in Somerset because it's my home. The home, it's after being away for so long, it meant more to me than anything because the ties, like, all right, so Dan, you would probably agree that the connections you made over your formative years in high school were like some of the strongest bonds you'll ever have.
Yeah, I mean, touching on that, especially in sports.
Yeah.
Playing numerous sports in high school, I ended up meeting a ton of people, and I'm still friends with today, doing meetings, and here we are.
Yeah.
30 years later, I was still connected to those people.
Right, and even you and I, like, we didn't hang out in high school, but we knew of each other, and there's that. It's just such a special connection. And when I lived away, people were like, "You're friends with what? You're friends with your friends from elementary school? Like, that's insane." So I realized, like, what a special thing we have here in our communities here. And it was so near and dear to me. It still is. And that's why I care so much about my town. And I just also realized, like, how good of a childhood I had. And I mean, because of it, it's like a double-edged sword because how sheltered I was, but in a good way. But that, that's hard when you're sheltered. Because you have to learn the hard way. So, anyway, I was loving being home. And I'm like, Mom, I want to get more involved. And she's like, oh, you should. There's some event they're going to have. So, our high school was built in 1936. It was still standing, but there had been a very controversial vote that had passed to build a new one because the old one, as beautiful as it was structurally crumbling. Like the foundation was sinking on one side, and there's some major structural issues, and it had nothing to do. Some of it had to do with maintenance, but it was just the structure of the building was deteriorating. So anyway, this is before I moved home. They voted to build a new high school, and the new high school was in construction when I moved home behind the old one. So my mom's like, oh, they're gonna have some event to celebrate the old building before they knock it down. And I'm like, that sounds awesome, because everyone here, that's another thing. Most of us here are so deeply rooted here that we're so sentimental. And I'm bringing that up for a reason, and I'll get to that reason. And Dan knows exactly why. He's laughing. So everyone here that we grew up with, I think everyone, whether they're good or bad people, they love their town. It's their home. So, and it's just sentimental, and there's this loyalty, there's this like bond that you have no matter who it is. So I was like, oh, that building is just so awesome. Plus my late father taught physics there, and it just had that meaning as well. And I have so many good memories in the building, like just so sentimental. So I was like, oh, who should I contact? And she said, oh, Julie Gagliardi, she's running the event from what I hear. So I threw my email in there, and Julie started these meetings. There are about 40 of us that showed up for the committee. And at the first meeting, I had to drive all the way from Boston, because I was working at Boston Medical Center, for 2 hours in traffic one way. I'd have to drive home for these 7 o'clock meetings. And I wanted to go. So I went to the first one. And it was awesome. And we just brainstormed and spitballed ideas. And there were 40 of us in the room. It was just the best committee ever. It was awesome. So spitballed the ideas. And then the second meeting the following week, again, 7 o'clock. It was like the middle of the week. And I had to go drive 2 hours. And by the time I had to leave work, I knew I'd be a little bit late for the meeting. So I'm like, should I go? I'm exhausted. I don't know. And Emily, my sister, was like, you need to go. So she convinced me to go. So I'm like, all right, fine. So I went. No big deal. I was just very tired. So again, more ideas, spitballing. And then Julie said, well, I need someone to I need to form a committee. Like, we all need to assign roles. So we started assigning roles, and people were volunteering for like decorating. Another group of volunteered for the memorabilia, which was incredible. The whole thing was incredible. And then, videographer, whatever it was, we had a committee, a subcommittee for each thing. Julie is amazing. Like, she does such a good job. So she assigned all these roles, and we had people dealing with sponsorships and fundraising and stuff like that. And then they get to the website. Now, I know you're all like, why the hell is she telling us this? This has nothing to do with Dan. It has everything to do with Dan. And it has everything to do with our relationship and how we are. So I want you to understand that, because it paints a picture of how we are. So the website role, and my sister's nudging me. Come on, you do it. I'm like, Emily, I'm not doing the website. And she's like, just do the website. Come on, nudging me. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, fine. So I raised my hand. Okay, Holly's doing the website. Okay, great. So then, a couple other roles. And then there was a vice chair. There were 2 vice chairs. And then, so then at the end, Julie's like, well, now I need someone to run the whole thing. And I'm like, what? Isn't she doing that? And she's like, no, I can't. I'm too in the political spotlight because she spearheaded the controversial article that passed to build a new school. So she's like, it just would have a negative impact. I want to stay neutral. We need someone that's neutral, which who would call me neutral now? But anyway, so, and I was neutral at the time because I had no clue about town politics. I didn't care about town politics. I cared about my town. And so Emily, Holly, you need to do this. And I'm like, Emily, no. I am such a crazy type A that I'm not going to have time to sleep. And I have to drive 4 hours a day to work, and I can't. And she's like, come on. And I'm like, oh my God. And I wanted to so bad, but I'm like, I don't know if I can handle it right now. She's like, no one wanted it. No one wanted it. I'm like, oh my God. So I raised my hand. I did it. I'm like, I'll do it. Honest to God, best decision I ever made. So anyway, I'm just making sure the camera's right. So I sign up. So long story short, Raiders Remember became this massive 2-part event one day on a Saturday, the day after the school was officially out of session and completely closed to the public. We had bars, stations for food, 5 different bands throughout the building. We had a massive kind of a store that we set up to sell Raiders Remember things and items. We had a step and repeat banner at the front when you come in, almost like a red carpet. We had the radio station there just chatting and interviewing people. We had sponsors, and we had a huge memorabilia room. It was incredible. The Historical Society put that on. It was just amazing. So, and I ran the whole thing like a construction project. So I was very specific. Now this is also important, so pay attention. So here I am, I'm building the website. I build the website, and because I'm still in California mode, I'm still like thinking club scene, Vegas. I have a whole episode I'm going to do about Vegas because that's one story, one whole podcast. But anyway, I had this mentality like super strict, like, you know, we don't want anyone to cut in line. We don't want people to try to sneak in and not pay, because we had to charge $45, which is actually really cheap for what everyone was getting. But anyway, so I was like, you know, I wrote all these directions, this long list of directions. I'm like, no one can get in. And I was using Eventbrite for ticket sales. We had some in-person sales, but most of them were online through Eventbrite, which no one in town, in my small town, like no one really knew what that was yet. They know what it is now, but at the time they were like, what is that? And then I was always, you know, in the tech, in the startup world, in that ecosystem, you're way ahead of the curve. I was there when Uber launched. I was there when Lyft launched. I was there when Airbnb launched. It was incredible. So like, I'm moving home and it's like culture shock. I'm like, wait a second, people don't know what this stuff is yet. So no one knew what Uber was. But anyway, I set this all up, very specific. I had a Google Voice number for my phone that forwarded to, or from Google Voice that forwarded to my phone. And it looked like a business because it was a website for Raiders Remember. And so, we called it Raiders Remember anyway. I didn't tell you that part. Because our mascot was a Raider, or is a Raider. So that became the name of the event. So I made the website. So I'm at work one day at Boston Medical Center. My phone rings, and it's around lunchtime. It's no big deal. And I thought it was related to work. So I answered it. And it was Dan Smith, who's sitting right here. And I'm at work, and I had no idea who it was. I just answered the phone. And do you want to tell this part?
Sure.
Okay, you tell this part.
So I talked myself into going to the event. I was skeptical at first, but I decided that I thought that would be a good thing for me at the time. And middle of the afternoon, I just called the phone number and this girl answered, and uh, so I told her what I was trying to accomplish, and I asked her, and she actually answered the phone. And she said, "This is Holly," and I was like, "Holly McNamara," because I saw it on the pamphlet.
Oh, that's right, because that's how I answer the phone at work.
Yeah, she goes, "This is Holly."
This is Holly.
And I said, "Holly McNamara?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I told her who I was, and she clearly remembered. Um,
No, I
no,
didn't.
she didn't.
I vaguely did.
But we ended up talking and getting to the root of the problem. And I told her what my issue was, and she, solved my problem.
Well, tell them what it was.
I used the wrong email because I wanted to buy another ticket.
But see, this is the important part, because here's Dan, and he doesn't know, he's never used Eventbrite before. He just got his first iPhone. And he's like, so he said he went on, he's like, well, I have a problem. I'm like, what's the problem? He said, well, I have a few problems. I'm like, okay, what's going on? And he said, I had a typo in the email address, and he explained that he was inviting his friend and it went to the wrong email, and he's nervous because he doesn't have the ticket, and the directions say on the website, this is his words verbatim, but the directions say on the website to print the ticket. Now, mind you, I told you I have that mentality, like Vegas, San Diego, club scene. I knew how to get into every club. Like, you had to say a certain thing and whatever. And I was treating it like that. And so the directions were crazy. It was like adamant, you will not get in if you don't print your ticket, which is a complete lie, because I was banking on the fact that no one knew what Eventbrite was and the fact that I had all the tickets in my phone. So, but I didn't tell anyone that because I didn't want anyone skipping lines, and I wanted them to hand me the physical ticket, and I didn't want to deal with any issues, because it ended up being 2,000 people in the day and 2,000 people at night. It was a massive event for me. I've never done anything like this before, right? So I'm like, wait, and then so Dan says, I don't have and he's freaking out. I don't have the email, the directions on the website. It says to print them, and I also don't have a printer. And I was like, wait, so is that it? He's like, what do you mean, is that it? The directions said you have to print it. And I'm like, no, wait, hold on a minute. and again, I'm like, oh my God, I got to switch gears. And I'm thinking to myself, who is this alien that just got a new iPhone for the first time, doesn't know Eventbrite, although I wasn't surprised about that, and read all of the directions. So like, I thought the other stuff was really cute. Like, that was really cute that he didn't have the iPhone yet, and he was very nervous, so he was like very respectful, and he followed every single word of those directions. And I was like, wait a second. No, I wrote those directions. He's like, what do you mean? But it's the website. And I'm like, no, I wrote the directions. Right?
Yeah, well, I want to touch on that.
Yeah.
My profession at the time was imperative that I read the directions.
Yes.
So I was trained in my mind to do exactly that. And if you didn't follow the directions and you didn't do the right measurements, you didn't do the right this or that, you can screw up real bad. And
you could lose your limb.
And you could lose your limb, and you could lose millions of dollars. So when it comes to a publisher, so in the printing industry, that is. So yeah, I was really concerned that I didn't have a printer, and I was concerned that I wasn't able to print that ticket out of my email. I was still kind of navigating through the whole iPhone email. So that was something new to me after 2013 or so. But yeah, that was something, and she made me feel at ease, and she kind of relaxed my my jitters about the whole thing, and
Yeah,
it felt
I
much
was
better
like,
going in.
yeah, I was like, listen, I wrote those directions. I had to tell him several times because he couldn't just couldn't understand that it was me that made that website. So I was like, no, don't worry about it. I wrote the directions. You technically don't tell anyone this, but you don't have to print your ticket. It's on your phone. I'm going to forward you the email right now because I got a copy of it in my email. And then you'll have it. And what is your email? So I wrote down, I sent him the tickets, everything was fine. He's like, how'd you do that? I'm like, don't worry about it. It was so cute. I was like, oh my God, who is this alien? I just came from San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and I'm like surrounded by all these tech geeks. And now I'm like, this is just so refreshing to be around someone that doesn't know, doesn't drop names, doesn't talk about who you know, doesn't even know how to use an iPhone. It was so refreshing. I was like, oh. So, and follows directions. A man that follows directions. So I was like, don't worry. I said, look, come to me with your phone. Don't tell anyone. Just show me your phone. I'll check you into the event. Go to only me. And he was like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah. So the event comes. Now you tell him this part. How when you showed up and what you were told.
Oh,
because I ran this thing like a construction job.
So
everyone was I was adamant they had tasks to do and I was just.
But we didn't go to you.
No, not at first.
So at first we went to a different line, and
because the lines were out the door. It was a lot of people.
Line. And so we brought our ID, and the guest that I was bringing did not have his ID on him, and because of Holly's sternness, and the people that were running the line on the other side were, sorry, you can't get in. So
they listened. It was amazing.
So I ended up dropping a name. I said, Holly McNamara. She's right there. She'll let me in.
And so they argued with him. It was great. They argued with him for a minute. They're like, no, nope. You can't get in. You don't have your printed ticket. And he's like, no, but I swear. But, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't tell them about this. So, think 2,000 people, and Dan's the only one. There was only one person that tried to get in without paying. And I know who it is. I remember. I remember exactly who it was. And they hate me right now because of politics, and I don't care. But anyway, so the person on the committee was like, okay, go to Holly. So Dan comes over, and I'm like, oh my God, go in. Yeah. So anyway, go about the night, and we had a great night. I didn't really see Dan until the end. Coincidentally, we had the whole school at the front lit up blue because that's our color. So it was just awesome. And I'm like, you know what? I got to go out there and see it before, because I was running around like a crazy person, making sure the event was running smoothly. And it was so great. But anyway, I'm like, I need to run out there. So I ran to the front right at the end. And I go outside, and there are 10 people from the inside just looking at the blue and taking pictures of the front of the school. And it was Dan. And I'm like, wait, you're that guy.
I always like to say at this point in the story that if one more person, it doesn't matter who it was, if one more person had said, hey, come here, let's take a quick picture, or if I had been taken aside for maybe even 30 seconds, that would have made a difference in our lives. And that's important, because we were able to meet on the front steps, take our little pictures. The blue, it was really, it meant a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we asked where the after party was.
Yeah, you did. They jokingly, kind of half jokingly, were like, where's everyone going after? I said, well, actually, we're going to go to the Pottersville pub. It's right, everyone knows where the Pottersville pub is. It was a total dive, but a lovable dive. Everyone loves dives. So, but it was just the place, the town place to be all the time. Now called the Mallard. So anyway, so I said, well, you can come down there. I just have to clean up the event and close everything down, and I'll meet you down there. And he was like, all right. So I did. And one of our mutual friends, she was helping me clean up and stuff. And She ended up being a mutual friend. I didn't know she knew Dan, but she drove me and we went to the pub together, and there was Dan. He's like, I was wondering when you were coming. Like, they were playing pool and hanging out.
Yeah, I thought I was getting blown off.
He did. And he started talking to me. Do you want to tell this part?
Oh yeah. She ended up finally showing up, grabbed a beer. She handed me a beer. We were chilling and just talking, and we were playing pool at the time. And I stopped and I started talking to her, and it was just like, all right, so Holly to me was the event organizer, and I had gone through a rough 9 months or so, and at that time, I was really grateful, and I was grateful for her efforts. I was grateful for everyone on the committee's efforts to putting the whole event together. And when I finally convinced myself to go and be there, and I jumped in and I made myself feel much better about myself and about life at the time. And at one moment, I put my arm around Holly and I said, thank you. Thank you so much for putting this event on, because it meant a lot to me, and it really did. It was genuine, and I wasn't trying to be intrusive or whatever you want to describe it as, but I felt really good about the night. And
it was your first night out, right, in a long, long time.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
So at that point, the night got into the night further and further, and then.
Well, yeah. I just have to add that when Dan was expressing his sincere, reminiscing and appreciation for the event, and talking about what the school meant to him and the sentimentality towards it, and he was being genuine, and he put his arm around me, but he was not hitting on me. No. So remember, now think about what I started this episode off with, like my San Diego, my crazy party life. So I'm like used to the meat market, and it's like people hitting on you. It's just like, ugh, the bars. Like I said, dating sucked in on the West Coast, but you had fun, but whatever. So Dan was here being this like gentleman, and he's nice and he's sincere and he's not hitting on me, and I didn't know what to do. So I stood there with my arms by my side, which everyone knows I usually I give someone a hug, or like I'm kind of affectionate. I talk with my hands. I wasn't doing that. I was like, I had my arms by my side, and I was very nervous, like a little kid. And I'm like, what is wrong with me right now? Like, what is happening? Here's this alien that doesn't know his iPhone, that just got it, that read all the directions and freaked out because it wasn't perfect, and found me at the event, and then I happened to run into him, and now he's being really nice, and I'm like, what? I'm just not used to that. I hadn't been used to it.
So, I want to add too that putting my arm around her was a thankful feeling to me. It was thank you so much. And I looked at this girl and I said, well, all right, she's beautiful. There's no way that she's single. I'm not even going to try. Not that I would, I didn't put in the effort at the time, and I wasn't, it was genuine, and I just thanked her, and we were closing up the night. And
I could tell that he was not trying to hit on me, which made me nervous. So we continued to stay in touch, and I felt this weird need to stay in touch with him, but I wasn't actively like, oh, I like this guy. I was just staying in touch with him, but I was like, oh, it was this weird, almost the sentimentality of the school and the whole thing. I didn't want to lose touch with him because the whole thing meant so much to me. And to be honest, the event, Dan and I talked about this, we felt like we lost something. It was almost like going to a wake. Mm-hmm. But it was so great and so fun, but it was so sad to see it go.
Yeah. Well, I was a Berkeley student, and I came to Somerset, and I didn't even know it existed. I didn't know Somerset was here. I wasn't worldly as a kid. being stuck in Berkeley, kind of on the Taunton side, it just being a Blue Raider and coming to Somerset and becoming a Blue Raider it meant a lot to me. And then seeing that school torn down in front of your eyes, it made you emotional. It made you feel like there was someone dying.
Yeah, the memories, you feel them. It's incredible. And like I said at the beginning, it's just such a unique place to live. People are like, why would you move back? And I'm like, you don't understand. So, why would you leave California in the record winter? And I didn't regret it at all. So, didn't miss it. Still don't. I'm happy. So anyway, so yeah, Dan and I stayed in touch. That following Monday, Emily, my sister, and I were like, so we were at the Sunday, actually, we were at the school. I invited Dan to come to get some, lockers. People were taking and buying lockers, planetarium chairs, the planetarium itself, which was phenomenal. But anyway, Dan came and met with me. He ran into my sister. He's like, oh, I know her. That's my sister. You're going to meet her right now? And so Dan already met my sister without realizing, and then came to sit with me. And we're both sitting there in silence as I'm typing and wrapping up the event. And all the committee members were there in the old guidance office. And so Dan and I we admitted later, like, we were both silent. Like, why are we both sitting next to each other? Like, I feel like we have to talk about something, or...
Well, at that moment, I was sitting in the guidance office, and I remember thinking to myself, okay, what am I doing here? Because this girl's obviously entrenched in whatever she's working on. And I said, okay, and I just kind of swung my foot, and I said, okay, I was just about to say, hey, I think I'm going to get going home, but thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
And before I could say those words, you said, hey, let's take a walk over to the old auditorium.
Yes.
The old odd.
Yes.
Anybody remember the old odd?
And then my mom came with us.
Yes.
She was there. She just happened to be there.
She took Kiwi from us.
Oh, she had the dog. That's right.
She took Kiwi from us and gave us a chance to walk the halls and just kind of talk. And we meandered past the library, down, took a left at the 500s.
Oh my
and
God, Dan has the best memory. I don't...
We passed the band room.
Oh my God.
And through the courtyard, into the 100s, and through the foreign language section. Shout out to Gertrude Ramil, my favorite teacher.
And my grandmother.
Amazing. Yes, and Cecile.
Cecile McNamara.
And we made it to the old auditorium. And
my sister was there. We were hacking up the old dog chairs to take them home, put them in my mom's garage. My mom's garage is full of Somerset memorabilia, whatever you want to call it. So what Dan was like, oh, so I took this chair, a very, very old wooden folding chair, to my car from the old
auditorium.
Yeah.
Near the stage.
Yep. And so Dan helped me bring it out. We went to my car, and he was going to leave. So he brought me out there with the chair I was putting in my car. And again, I stood there like a 15-year-old with my arms by my side. Okay, bye. And like, I'm a hugger. I hug everyone, and I would not hug him goodbye. I was like, bye. What the hell's wrong with me?
Well, in my mind, I know I put my tongue down your throat.
Oh, God.
Sorry to ruin that part, but no, that didn't happen.
Definitely did not happen. But I was still nervous. You're lucky this isn't a rated G podcast.
No, it's not.
Okay, so
I'm just getting warmed up.
So I said goodbye with my weird, standing there stiff. Went inside, did my thing, and the next day, Emily and I were freaking out because they were about to close up the school to demo it. And we're like, oh my God, we have to go to my dad's classroom. We have to get all the stuff, whatever we can get. So I don't know why. Well, I subliminally, I guess, wanted to talk to Dan. So I was like, do you have a truck? And Dan's like, yeah, I can find a truck. Now I'm thinking he has a truck. He doesn't have a truck. He worked 12-hour shift and found a truck. He's borrowed it from his friend. I didn't know this until later. But anyway, he's like, yeah, I got one. And I'm like, oh my God, Andy's reliable. So then I said, well, he's like, what do you need it for? And I said, well, Monday at 7 p.m., or it was that
No,
night.
tonight.
Yeah, it was that night. 7 p.m. after work, I'm bolting home from BMC, and Emily and I want to go to my dad's classroom, blah, blah, blah. And Dan's like, oh, I'll help you. I'll get the truck. So he met us right there at 7 p.m. We went in. Emily and I got so much stuff from my dad's classroom, including the doors. So Dan is here with Emily's boyfriend, Chris, unscrewing the doors. He's literally bleeding and sweating. And he's like, oh, you made me, blood, sweat, and tears. I'm like, oh my God. His son Cameron's running around the school. It was so funny. So I just met Cameron. And I'm like, oh my God, I put this poor guy through all this. Like, why did I call him the poor thing? So he helps Emily and I, because we're crazy. We removed 4 doors from my dad's classroom, and we have them in my mom's garage. And Dan and I also, he helped me. I put a cell phone. We had to put a cell phone to use as a mirror to get one of the knobs off of the sink, which is nuts, I know. And I'm like, oh, I need to take a selfie of this. I just need to have it. I know something's going to come of this someday. And Dan has it as his, yep, as his screensaver. Hold it up again. There you go.
Still
We still have that knob from the sink,
a
but
lot less gray hair.
anyway. So that's how we met. And I flew to California. So the next week, I said, Dan, I got to repay you. And I invited him for a beer. I was living with my mom. He's like, okay. So again, worked a whole shift. Came to my mom's in the rain. Sat on the porch for 4 hours and chatted and just talked for 4 hours in the rain. And I was like,
Well, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
So before she left for California, she invited me for a beer to repay me, which she didn't to do, but she said she would. So I got done with work, and she said, meet me at my mom's around 1:15. So it was a little after 1, and I was already at Center Street. So I decided to kind of take a little ride. I didn't want to be too early, make it look too. But at this point, I was intrigued by you, and absolutely. And I started to get a little nervous. I started to feel it, and
so guys, you need to know this because it's a common theme through our whole relationship in politics and everything. I know it's a long story, but bear with us. Okay, go ahead.
yeah. So we ended up meeting. Like I said, I showed up a few minutes before 1:15, just to look that I was early, but not too early. And I get there, and we did, like you said, we talked for 4+ hours. It was raining. There was thunderstorms. There was a hurricane going over. It was July 4th, 2014. And yeah, we sat there. Her mom came out on the porch and gave us a bottle of water and went back inside and checked on us, I think.
She did.
But then we ended up going for our appetizing.
We did. Should I tell them what I said?
Sure.
Okay. So now, mind you, Dan and I had been texting the whole week and just friendly and whatever. We just stayed in touch and we had great conversations. And so leading up to this, we were texting all week. And the night before this, I had gone out with a girlfriend to one of the bars in Quincy and the marina. And it was an absolute shit show. And it was a meat market and I hated it. So I texted Dan. It was like 1 a.m. I had had too much to drink. I wanted to get out of there. And I was not hitting on him, but I was like, I want someone nice I just want to go home safely and go to bed. And I thought of him and I was just like kind of laughing, and I knew he was at work, but I texted him basically like, save me. And I knew he couldn't save me. I was just joking, like, this place is awful, because we were laughing about, oh, you're going to go to a club tonight, whatever. I told him I was drinking Jaeger, and ugh. So he's like, oh, I like Jaeger and whatever. But I ended up just telling him, like, oh, this place sucks. I need to get out of here. Save me. Save me now. But it was lots of typos and gibberish. You could barely make out the words.
So I turned to my assistant at the time. I turned to him. I said, "What does this mean? What is she saying?" Because I have no idea.
Because Dan had not been in the dating scene for 20 years.
Right. So at this point, I said, "I have no idea what she meant." We deciphered it. We figured it out after a couple of minutes. And my assistant said, my friend said, "I think she wants you to take her out of there and help her." I said, "Okay, well, I can't do that. I'm at work."
And I knew that.
I will get fired if I leave. But so go ahead.
Yeah. And so he takes it very literally, which is how he takes everything. So, which is great though, because they figured it out. I still have the text. Anyway, so the next day was the day he met me at my mom's. We sat on the porch for 4 hours. We went to the bar. I was very hungover and not really expecting anything. Like, I was just taking him out for a beer. And we talked about our lives and what we were up to and who we are. Like, we didn't know each other. So, like, oh, you said you were separated for 8 months, 9 months, and you were kind of starting to get out of your shell and, start to go out. And the Raiders Remember was part of that. And me being, having lived 14 years in spring break San Diego and Vegas and San Francisco, crazy party time. But in my defense, I think this applies to anyone that's going through a divorce. So I was like, oh, so you're going through a divorce. And I had made a vow I was not going near any married men because I was tired of being hit on by them, and it was like grossing me out at the time. And I was like, I'm like, oh, so you're going through divorce, okay? I said, so you basically need like 2 years to recover, because that's what my single girls and I always used to say. They need 2 years after they're divorced. So I'm like, and not only do you need 2 years, but you need to go out and bang 20 chicks. And Dan, like, he's like, what did you say?
My eyes popped out of my head.
And I was so hungover, and I'm like, no, I said that. I really did. I mean it. And he was like, what the fuck's wrong with this girl? And he didn't say that, but he was so polite, and he was like mortified. You could see it in his face.
No, I was absolutely thinking it.
And he was like looking around like, did anyone hear it? Oh my God. He's like, no, I'm not trying to do that, Holly. I'm like, no, that's all you're going to do. Just take a couple years and go sow your oats. You'll be fine. He's like, oh my God. So anyway, we leave, and brings me home, and again, won't hug him. I think I forced myself to hug him goodbye.
You hugged goodbye.
Yeah, I forced it. I was like, I have to. This is being weird. If I don't hug him, it's weird. So anyway, so I go home, and that's it. We continue to text. Well, and I get on a plane to California, and because I went for vacation for 3 weeks to see all my friends and a conference and all this stuff. And Dan and I talked and stayed in touch the whole 3 weeks. We watched a movie together remotely, and then he invited me to a concert. And when I got home, and I'm like, he's actually asking me on a date? Because that's not what it's like out west. So I'm like,
I want to say something about that.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I had bought these concert tickets to this concert I had them for about a month in my possession, and didn't even know you at the time. I just felt like buying them. It was one of my favorite bands. So at that point, I said, I didn't know who I was going to bring. So, I tossed it around a little bit. I only had one extra ticket. And I knew she was coming home soon. And I remembered the good connection that we had. And I said, I don't know what music she likes, but we'll find out. And I asked her if she wanted to go. with me to the concert, and that night, and then I ended up picking you up at the airport too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he offered to pick me up from the airport. And I'm like, he's going to drive all the way here to Boston to pick me up from Somerset? Like, wow. So he's reliable. He reads directions. He's nice, all this stuff. So anyway, that's how we started dating. Okay. So we start dating. Do you hear an echo? Okay. We start dating, and Dan's, not to get into his personal stuff, but he's going through his separation. I learned he wasn't actually divorced yet. I didn't know that. He was just separated, which was like breaking all my rules, which is fine. It worked out fine. So anyway, he was living in Taunton, which I was there all the time. Met the kids. It was great. And at the time, the kids were 10 and 13.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he wanted to get them into the Somerset school system. So I was like, oh, let's help you get an apartment in Somerset. Okay, perfect. So long story short, we find him an apartment, or I found him an apartment. He looked at the apartment and loved it, and moved in and with the kids. And it was in Somerset. Changed the school, great. I was there all the time again. And now, mind you, it was like fast paced. We had just gotten together. We had already committed to each other, which is a funny story, but anyway, I'll spare the listeners. He had just moved to Somerset, and here I am, like, I'm working. I work from home most of the time, so I was working at the apartment. I was working at my mom's or with Dan, whatever, and traveling for work. And how many months in? Two months?
Like, I sold my house in October of 2014.
Yeah. And then you moved to Taunton.
Yeah. And then I moved to Taunton. I moved to an apartment. 6 months I was there. I broke the lease because we found this apartment in Somerset and we wanted to book the kids. My daughter was already in Berkeley, so she was going to Somerset High School. But my son, I wanted to put him in Somerset Middle School. I heard great things about the school system here, so that's what we did. I decided to break that lease. We found this apartment, and we ended up. I moved in here. April of 2015.
Yes, so it was almost a year after Raiders Remember.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't even together a year yet. So Dan gets this apartment. He moves in. April, let's see. May, June, July. So, no, it was like a month later. 2 months later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like 2 months later. I was with my sister back, helping her get a piece of furniture she bought at a yard sale. We're driving back down Riverside Avenue. We're in sweats. We were gross. It was a Saturday morning. We were toying around. Now, I was still living with my mom. I was hunkering down. I was paying off my debt. I was almost done. And then I was going to move towards Boston. But anyway, paying off my debt. And my sister was like, hey, we would talk about houses. And someday I'm going to buy a house in Somerset. Mind you, I hadn't saved a dime because I was paying off my debt, but I was almost done. And I was like, oh, someday I'm going to save a nice egg and I'm going to, buy a house. Not in a rush. Well, that day, and again, this was like 2 months after Dan found this apartment and moved in. That day, Emily and I were like, hey, we saw this house for sale on Facebook. Like, someone shared it on Facebook. Let's go check it out. It's up that street. And I had seen them once. I thought they were moving in, but they were actually staging it. So I'm like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that. So Emily stops the car, backs up in reverse because she missed the street. It was Harrington Lane. And I'm like, Emily, we don't need to see it that bad. But she's like, no, let's go. So we go up the street. Turns out, coincidentally, there's an actual open house. So we're like, oh my God, we're going in. So we go in our sweats and our, it wasn't really sweats. It was like workout gear because we're all sweaty and gross. And not, we were just going to look. And there were so many people in there looking at this house. And we go, so many people eyeballing each other. We signed the thing. It says we didn't have a house to sell because I own nothing except my dog. And that was it. So it's gorgeous. And I'm like, I asked the realtor, I'm like, what's going on? So she said, now this is also important. I don't know if we'll get into it on this podcast, but it will come up. So she said, the house next door, the neighbor bought his house on Riverside on the water. And my house was on the water, but it was set like kind of diagonal from his up Harrington Lane. So this neighbor had bought his house, wanted a pizza wedge to redeed a pizza wedge of land from what was soon to be my house so he could build his pool. And the owners of the house wouldn't sell him the pizza wedge. So he said, well, fuck it, I'll buy the whole house. So he did. He bought the whole house. They were like, okay. Sold it to him. Bought the whole house. He sunk, a few thousand into it, 30 grand to flip it. And it wasn't selling because it was at the time, it was very expensive. He was also asking for way too much at the time. So when he lowered the price 50 grand, a lot of people showed up, and that was the open house. So I end up, I go home. On the way home, my sister's like, oh, no. I asked the agent, I'm like, why is this house for sale? And she tells me that story. And she says, and he doesn't want to sell it to anyone that has a house to sell. And everyone has a house to sell. I'm like, well, I don't have a house to sell. And she's like, well, do it. You should buy it. I'm like, I can't buy a fucking house right now. I can't buy, I don't have money saved up yet. And she's like, oh, you can find a way. I'm like, no. I'll see you later. So I go home with my sister, and Emily, who is not impulsive, I'm the impulsive one. I was saying no. Emily goes into my mom's house and is like, Mom, Holly's buying a house. And I'm like, Emily, I'm not buying a house. And she's like, you need to buy that house. I'm like, I'm not buying that house. So she's like, just make some phone calls. So I did. So I called Jameson Souza. Actually, I called the agent first. I said, Deb, is this really, are there really no offers on this house? That's crazy. And she's like, Holly, he will not accept one offer because they're all contingent on a house sale. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to call you back. So I call Jamie. I go to Jameson's house, Jamie Souza, who's one of my friends from high school, one of my closest friends, president of my class. Now he's becoming a real estate agent. So I'm like, Jamie, what do I do? He's like, just come over. Let's run some numbers. So I'm like, all right, run some numbers. And I'm like, I can't, how am I going to do this? He's like, well, look, you take the money you're putting towards your debt, you put it towards a down payment, you get an FHA loan, and you're good. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. He's like, how about we lowball the offer because that's all you can afford, and we'll see. All right. So we did. So I'm like, oh my God, I just put an offer on a house. So now this is where Dan comes in. So Dan is home. Now, this is right before I put the offer on the house, when Emily was like, you're buying this house. So I had set up a walkthrough with Jameson. And I'm like, I gotta go tell Dan. So Dan's sleeping. You were finishing the night shift, right?
Yeah, I was just going down to sleep because I had finished the night shift, and it was about 9:30 in the morning, and you said, we have to go somewhere.
Oh no, because it was 5:30. You were just going to sleep or waking up for your night shift, and I said we need to go somewhere at 9:30 in the morning.
Oh yeah.
And I said I have to tell you something, and he's like, what? And I'm like, look, I know we just met, but I just saw this house and I know I'm insane. And he's like, what the hell am I getting myself into? And he's like, what do you mean you saw a house? He's like, well, now mind you, he just moved into his apartment. So I'm like, well, um, you, I know you're going through what you're going through with your divorce. And I don't expect you to have to, like, pay or move in or whatever. I just want you to be part of this. Like, if you like it, because I want to provide. And, like, if we do stay together, it'd be awesome. And if we don't stay together, then I own a house. Like, it's a win-win. So he's like, oh my God, okay, I'm just gonna go to bed now. Like, okay, let's go tomorrow. He's like, okay. So we went, and then long story short, and then I put the deal on the house. Jamie's like, yeah, you got to do it. Put the offer on the house. Met now the owner, which is the neighbor, told his agent to tell my agent he wanted to talk to me directly, which I was fine with. So he had me come over, talk to him directly, like a Tony Soprano guy. It was really nice. Was like, look, we have mutual friends. I don't want my neighbors calling the cops because I'm gonna have parties. I'm like, I'll go to your parties. Now his house is beautiful. And he's like, oh, this is where the pool is going, and this is where the fence is going. And I said, well, as long as I can see the water, we're good. He's like, no problem. I'm like, and I can see the water where the fence is going. It's fine. It's perfect. Shook hands, signed the deal, done. Dan is like, oh my God. So then Dan breaks his lease again, the new lease to the apartment early. And the landlord was like, what the hell? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'll handle it. I'll find you someone to take over the lease. So I put out a Facebook ad for the apartment, and we had, in 1 hour, 75 requests. I'm like, am I back in San Francisco? Like, people, now this is also important because no one knows where Somerset, Massachusetts is. People, like, okay, the president came here. Now they might know where it is, but before that, nobody knows where Somerset, Massachusetts is. That type of demand for the market is like San Francisco. Like, San Francisco apartments go the minute they're on the market. That was what it was like. And I was blown away. I'm like, I just came here from one of the most expensive cities in the country where it's very hard to find an apartment. And this is exactly what it was like. I was blown away. I'm like, this town has so much potential. We are bordered by water to the just shy of being an island. We have all access to major cities, freeways, highways, airports. Like, so it started to like really hit me. And then the sentimentality of Readers Remember, and Dan being this alien, like everything was falling into place. I'm buying a house, like all this stuff. So Dan moves in, and 6 months later, I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to run for office. Now, I already told that story, and I can talk about it another time. But Dan's like, what the fuck?
I said, what the fuck?
What do you mean you're running for office?
Well, my first question was, well, what the hell does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Selectman. I didn't even know what a selectman was. I knew it was
I didn't either.
I knew it was a governing thing. I knew it was a mayor, like a kind of like a mayor, but smaller scale. And I said, well, what exactly does that entail? What is being a selectman mean, and what does that do? What are your what's going to be your job? And what was your answer?
And I said, oh, I think you just go to a few meetings here and there. Twice a month. Just a few meetings.
We all know that's not.
Oh my God. Just like the dog was a trial period of 15 years. So he was like, the poor Dan was like, I'm like, Dan, I found your apartment. Okay. Dan, I'm buying a house. Okay. Dan, I'm going to run for office. It's like, what the fuck? So, poor Dan. So, now wait, I'm going to stop right here because this is when I run for office, and this is when we get into like the politics and all this stuff. Did I leave anything out? Do you want to add anything else?
No, it's pretty pretty thorough, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. So I decided to run for office. Campaigning starts in January. I was the last one to pull papers. I think I told everyone this story already, but we don't need to get into that. Now, people want to know, okay, what is it like for Dan? So at this point, all this stuff has happened. Um, we have to talk about the San Diego incident. I forgot to put that on the list. Um, we have gone through the craziest shit as a couple, as individuals and a couple that you would ever hear of, for the most part. So, so let's talk about campaigning. So the campaigning starts, and I'm like OCD again, running this like Raiders Remember, running it like a construction job, like having these meetings. I was incredibly crazy organized, like just crazy, nonstop. So I want you to talk about like what it was like for you. So let me just preface this with, when I got into office, everyone says, especially Senator Rodrick, he always said the most important role is not that of the elected official. The hardest and the most important role is that of the significant other.
Mm-hmm.
And he is right, because I would not have survived without Dan. But anyway, talk about campaigning for you, because I know what it was like for me, but the point here is to talk about what you felt like.
Okay, well, let's go back to where where I asked what selectman means, and we've learned that answer didn't apply.
No.
So as we learned and as we grew and went down this road together, the things that we learned were that some of the things weren't so nice. We met amazing people, and I'm kind of a under the radar type of guy. I kind of like to be quiet and just kind of go about my business, do my job, take care of my kids. But as you get more and more well known, especially in a smaller town like this, it got to the point where it was something I was used to, if you will, going to the supermarket for, and I get called, "Hi, Holly's boyfriend," or "Mr. McNamara," which was one of my favorites.
But I think that came more. Didn't that come more when I was elected, or was that right from the get go?
Well, all right. So, talk about campaigning. That was a tricky road because you had people trying to derail you, trying to give you false information. You're trying to have you're having lunch or meetings with people, and then the whole campaign road. It's social media nowadays. It made it, not enjoyable sometimes. Uh, I was into it, being a support system. I felt like it was my own, and I supported her like it was my own, and it was ours, if you will. And we ended up. She ran a tight ship, no doubt. We ended up campaigning hard. I knew it was something that she really wanted, so I wanted to work for her. And I was working the night shift at the time. I remember at one point grabbing door flyers, getting closer to the election, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so. We're hanging door flyers on door handles on the pouring rain before I worked a 12-hour shift overnight. And I'm proud to say that because I felt like, that was that is what I could give her, and I could contribute to this whole campaign of hers. And so she made a nice with the trailer, and that showed what she was going to do if elected.
Yeah. So, Dan and I, it got and to talk to the campaign more, and just like the personalities. So I was meeting all sorts of people. and people that wanted to be part of my team that I had no idea who they were. I'm like, where are these people coming from? Um, this one guy, let's use a fake name. What's his name?
Ricardo.
Ricardo. I don't know any Ricardos, so we'll just go with Ricardo. Ricardo came to one of my first meetings. He was supporting another candidate. The other candidate dropped out to support me. And this Ricardo guy came to my meeting, and I was so excited because we had talked already before. We had become friends through another mutual friend. And he was in between jobs, so he was available every minute of every day. And it was awesome because I had, Dan had to work a lot, and he was tired because his shift was off hours and whatever. So this Ricardo guy was always there. Always there, which was awesome. I needed the support so bad. And it got very stressful because people started attacking you for no reason. It's nasty. At first I thought it was funny, and then it became constant, and then it's like, and then social media, it was like, just starting to become a big thing. So people were like, oh, like they're not used to people running campaigns on social media. So again, here I'm coming from the West Coast, like full blown social media campaign, and everyone else is like, what the heck's going on? So, but I was just constantly getting attacked, the groups. It was just nasty. And I was warned that this is how it goes. So, but at first I was like, it was really hard. And throughout the campaign, this person, Ricardo, was always there supporting me, making me feel better about myself, helping me do what I needed to do. And me being type A, like I just wanted to do stuff all the time. And I actually worked a lot too in my full-time job. So I didn't get much sleep. I ended up getting really sick. It happens. And so, but I pushed and pushed because I knew if I didn't do everything that I wanted to do, and if I lost, I'd be mad. So I just did everything all the time. And this person was always there, Ricardo. And one night he's like, because I had a really bad day, and he's like, you know what, you need to go have some drinks. I'm going to take you out. We're going to be off the grid somewhere else, not in town. Just don't tell my wife. And I'm like, what? Why? Like, Dan knows every time you're here. Like, I'm going to tell Dan, but I don't know why you don't want to tell your wife. He's like, I don't know. Well, I thought that was weird, but I'm like, I don't know anything about their relationship. So, because I really didn't know her at all. So I'm like, it's none of my business, whatever. Takes me out for drinks. We talked about a lot of the stuff that I talked about actually at the beginning of this episode. My life and, this, how I love my life, but there have been stressors, and now I'm happy to be home and I care so much, blah, blah, blah. Told him some crazy stories about Vegas and living there and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, he's like, all right. And we were about to leave. He paid the bill. And walking to my car, he just grabs me. There was no leading up to this. He just grabs me. It sticks his tongue down my throat. And I was like, so I like pushed him off. And I'm like, no. So he was, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. It was like, took a minute. So I'm like, I can't. So we get in the car, and drives me home, and then he holds my hand, and I'm like, I guess I'll just let him hold my hand as a friend, because that's all I can do. Brings me home, and that was it. So I'm like, all right, he got the memo. That was a hard no. And I was like, what? Like, what is he doing? Like, he's married. He knows Dan. He's at my house every day. Like, I'm not.
Well, that's what they do.
Right. So, and I just was so confused. I'm like, oh my God, like, what the hell? What is going on? I don't know what to do. And now the election was coming up. So I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? So I'm like, okay, everything seems fine. Like, he got the memo. Everything's fine. Well, sure enough, we meet up for lunch or whatever it was, campaigning all the time. Dan's at work, and he starts trying to hold my hand, and then he starts trying to hug me, and and I was like, no, every time, no, no, no. Kept trying. I'm like, oh my God, I just want my friend back. Like, who is this person? I already said no 500 times, and I want my friend back. I don't understand why. Again, you all know now that I had been single for 14 years. I'd never encountered something like this ever. So I'm like, what the fuck? And so I'm like, do I tell Dan? This guy is always in our house. I have to finish my campaign. I'm so confused. Why is he not taking no for an answer? I'm very uncomfortable. Like, it's fucking awful. But I had to just keep going because I had to finish at the finish line and then I would deal with it after the election. So it was like another week or so, maybe. And then the election. Okay, great. A week after I won the election, it was fantastic. It had been a few days since he hit on me, so that was fine. But the election was just incredible. It was one of the most euphoric moments in my life to this day. And so anyway, a week later was town meeting, big meeting, the whole town. We all met up afterwards. It was my first town meeting. Everyone on my team was excited. We all went to the bar afterwards. Great. Go to the bar, have a couple drinks. I was driving, so I couldn't have more than a couple. Had fun, went outside. Everyone was talking. It was great. Ha ha ha, bye bye bye. See you later. Split up, went to our cars. I was talking to this guy, the same guy, Ricardo. Normal conversation, like always. Good. Everything's back to normal. So we keep talking. I'm walking to my car. He comes with me. We continue the conversation. He gets in the car. I'm like, oh, all right. So we talking, and he sits down. I'm thinking we're just going to finish the conversation. People do that. Then he decides to lean completely into my seat and shove his hand up between my legs and stick his tongue down my throat. And it all happened at the same time, and I'm luckily strong, so I pried him. I had to pry him off of me, and then I found a way to shove him into his door. I said, get the fuck out of my car. And he wouldn't. But I had to use all of my strength, and he kept trying, and it was a battle for a minute. And then he finally left. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck? So I harbored that, and he told me, I should have never gotten close. You haven't called me. You haven't talked to me. And I'm like, why would I? So now I'm like, what do I tell Dan? What do I do? I am like, there's so much going on. Like, I don't want to hurt Dan. I handled it. It's done. But like, I have to tell him.
Right, but his help, what we realized that his help on that campaign was it was conditional.
Mm-hmm.
And he was after one thing.
Yes.
And that was apparent.
And he had time.
Too much time. And I didn't.
Right.
And
he knew when Dan and I were fighting. Like, he pretty much knew what was going on behind closed doors because he was there all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll touch on that. This is how fooled I was. At one point, Holly and I had an argument. We were really, it doesn't matter in politics or, who your friends are or whatnot, you still argue, you still have differences sometimes, especially growing a relationship. And we got into a disagreement. And I'm one of those people. I'll get in the car, I'll drive away, I'll just kind of cool off or whatever, talk things out in my head. Well, I did that, and I ended up killing my battery because I was listening to the radio, stupidly not thinking about the car not being running, and I killed my battery. Well, I called Ricardo.
At the waterfront park.
Yeah, it happened to be waterfront park. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to add that, but
sorry.
I called him because
you thought he was a friend.
I thought at that point that he was uh, Holly's compadre, her go-to guy, and she had a lot of support in her campaign. But he happened to be in between jobs, and he was there all the time, and that was a problem. And I didn't know it at the time, but I called him, and at that point, no lie, he tried to talk me out of my relationship with you.
Yep.
I didn't know that anything had taken place at that point, and you call me naive if you want to.
I was naive. I didn't. I mean, what?
I felt like I was naive, but I wasn't seeing red flags or anything like that. So that's how slick this guy was.
Oh yeah.
And at that point, I talked to him and we had an argument. Instead of saying, "Hey, you know what? The best thing you can do right now is turn around, go home, and talk to your girl and work things out." He talked me out of. He said, "Well, maybe you guys aren't good enough for each other. Maybe you guys aren't right.
Yep.
Maybe you guys need to just walk away." And if that's not a fucking snake in the grass, then nothing is, man. It's a
right.
So
exactly. It was so shady. So anyway, oh, my microphone. So that was, so Dan didn't know. I didn't tell Dan yet. The town meeting stuff came and went. We had that fight. And then he's online on Facebook. He starts bashing me with people, calling me shady, talking mostly about the political decisions. And he's like, "Oh, she shouldn't have done this. She shouldn't have done that." And people, my constituents, were writing to me like, "Hey, I thought this was your campaign manager." Now, he wasn't my campaign manager. Jameson Souza was, who's one of my best friends, who was my agent that helped me buy my house, who's a selectman right now, by the way.
he had his own life. He was busy.
He was very busy. Has a family and jobs, multiple jobs. Like, he's working a lot. And so this Ricardo guy, again, fake name, was acting like my campaign manager would. Like, he was doing everything. So the constituents and the public, they all thought he was my friend and my campaign manager. And here he is bashing me like 2 weeks after the election, hardcore. And so I was very hurt. I'm like, "What are you doing?" So it wouldn't stop. Bash, 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 bash. I'm like, "What are you doing?" So like, finally, like, it slowed down a little bit. And so the election was in May. So it was May 2016. May 9th. In October, I think it was October, Ricardo invited the current police chief, Chief McNeil, and one of our dear late friends, Rod Stafford, to the Pats game because his company had tickets or something. He had a new job. And they went, and Chief McNeil, I went to see one day. I went to see the new, what do they call it? It's a detective car. It's the Charger. I went to see it because we had just approved it as a select board. So I went to see it, and he was chatting with me. He's like, "Holly, we were going to take it out for a drive." So we sat in the car for a minute, and he's like, "Holly, I have a question." I'm like, "What?" He said, that Ricardo invited us to the Pats game, and we just went, and all he did was talk shit about you. I don't understand. And I'm like, "What? Again? Like, what? To you? Like, he knows I support you and my friend, and like, what? What did he say?" And it was the same type of bashing. And I started bawling, which I did not expect. I'm like, wait, why am I upset about this idiot? But I started bawling. I feel like I was fucking traumatized. So I cried to George, and he's like, "Holly, that's predatorial. Do you want to press charges? Like, what?" I'm like, "Not right now. I can't, whatever." And I'm like, I can't deal with it. It's like too much. I have to tell Dan. I don't know what I'm going to do. And he was like, well, you just let me know. I'm like, okay. So anyway, when did I tell you? I don't remember.
It was not long after that.
Yeah. And I remember telling George, and I'm like, okay, I got to tell Dan now. So then I did.
I was actually, rightfully so, I was upset that she told me after.
Yeah.
But she felt, and being a police chief and trusted friend, that she wanted to kind of gauge her options at that point.
Yeah.
And, that was fine. I agreed with that. I was fine with it. George was a friend of mine as well. And she did tell him, and she told me, and, well,
I ended up eventually taking it to the DA. I won't get into that.
no, but it was upsetting. And once I learned about all this, I tossed it around for a couple of weeks, and we had many discussions about it. And it really was.
It's a mind fuck.
It is. It's a total mind fuck. I wanted to. You have to contain yourself nowadays. You can't fly off the handle. You want to be. You can't be violent. You can't overreact, and you have to kind of keep you cool. And that's what I did. And so I let her do her thing and talk to the appropriate people. I was within earshot of most of the phone calls that she had with this, and it did go to the DA. And
we were all interviewed. He was interviewed. Everyone was interviewed. I won't get into that, but it's still in there. Anyway, so that was just campaigning in the beginning of me being in office. That was just the beginning.
That's first couple months.
That was one thing that was so massive that any couple would have issues over. But that was just one thing at the beginning of 5 to 6 years of this. And I'm like, oh my God. What? Never mind, just the stress of the job, but this stuff is just crazy. So then comes being in office. Okay, so then the rumors start. And I'm like, what rumors? People were telling me, even during the campaign, some rumors had started, but especially after I was elected, they were like, oh, people would come up to me, hey, I heard this rumor about you. I'm like, what? And I know it's a small town, and there were rumors when I was in college, but this is different. I just ran for office, and you know everything about me now. And now you're spreading rumors. You love the drama. So these people were like, I'm like, what's the rumor? And they're like, well, you're having an affair with Chief McNeil. I'm like, oh my God. So George and I used to laugh all the time. And I think he said this once, Holly, because we're two good looking people, they think we're hooking up. What the fuck? We're not hooking up. That's so unprofessional. I would never. So he we would laugh about it though. It was funny. Oh, and then eventually, I think a year later, it was several years later, but regardless, it was several years later. But prior, when the rumor started about me, there was a rumor that this woman, I won't say names, that I had appointed to a job in town, who I just met because of the appointment. It was a recommended appointment. So my board appointed it. It was no issue. I met her that day for the first time. She became a friend. The new rumor was that she and I were having an affair with the chief of police, which is hilarious because I don't do that. And I'm not attracted to either of them. So if they're attracted to me, fine. But I don't know that. So, but Dan, do you remember?
Uh-huh.
So what did you think about these How did you feel?
Well, I mean, it's comical. It gets to a point where you have to laugh, and so I mean, I didn't hear too many of the things. Tried to stay off of Facebook and try to scrub the rumors, if I will. You dealt with it mostly. I don't know what happened after that. It was just a laugh.
Yeah.
We were friends.
But it continued for 5 years. The rumors did. I'd still hear them, and I'm like, oh
yeah,
my God.
we'd still go out.
But we'd all laugh, the four of us. And then eventually they ended up dating the other person and the chief. And they're wonderful. And they became good friends.
We do dinners and whatnot. We're still friends to this day.
Yeah. So I don't know, Dan, I want you to talk more about what it was like witnessing. So I would wake up so many mornings crying, sad, stressed because of social media. People would send me screenshots of all the bad shit people were saying about me, and it was constant.
Well, yeah. She'd come home upset. A lot of the times, I wasn't going to every selectman meeting. I'd throw it on the television, and I'd stay home. I could be a provider and a caring person, so I'm at home in our house and taking care of the dogs, and my kids were there at the time. Excuse me. And she'd walk through the door, and the selectman meeting would be, might have gone a little long that night, or a couple hours, 3 hours, 4 hours sometimes, and then she'd walk through the door, and I'd have maybe a glass of wine, or just to kind of, a nice cooked dinner, try to make her feel a little dim, and try to make her feel a little bit appreciated and calm, and it was on several occasions that had occurred. Yeah. So
thank God.
And to see you in that state, it upset me. And I was always by your side.
And you still are. And there were mornings too, and I'd wake up and I'd read my phone and I'd read, oh, look at this, look at that. Stuff I don't want to see. And Dan was like, can you guys please stop sending her this stuff? I had to take care of myself. I had to go to therapy. I had to go to the doctor, get medication to help my anxiety.
Well, just knowing those attacks were going to keep coming, that wasn't something that was a good feeling.
No. So do you remember when you took me out for my birthday, 2019, I think it was? Now, I have an obsession with cheeseburgers. I love cheeseburgers. Everyone knows that. I woke up the morning of my birthday and I posted a beautiful picture of my sunset over my neighbor's house on the water. And I said, today's a great day for sunrise. It was a sunrise, sorry. Sunrises and cheeseburgers. And sure enough, my haters were like, where was Holly last night? Because I was at dinner for my birthday. Yeah. I didn't go to the meeting that this person thought I should have been at. I wasn't supposed to be at the meeting. But this person decided that I should have been at the meeting. And they posted online, where were the selectmen? Why weren't they at this meeting? Well, I know where Holly was. She was eating cheeseburgers. Pathetic. Now this person, Pat McDonald, in town, has not stopped since.
As you know.
And that is how the cheeseburger story started. By Pat McDonald. Being nasty. He's still nasty.
When you were out for a nice dinner for your birthday.
Nice dinner for my birthday. I woke up to that shit and it ruined my day the next day. And it shouldn't have, because you know what? I finally am at a place where I'm like, I don't care. You say or think whatever the fuck you want, because I can sleep at night and you're a bad person.
Well, that's been proven. So we're we're still dealing with that town, that crap.
Yeah. We should talk about San Diego. No?
Yeah, sure.
It's stressful.
Mm-hmm.
This is a story that you're not going to believe. So, like I said, I used to live in San Diego for a long time. It's like my second home now. I grew up there. I grew up there in a way, like in my 20s. I learned a lot there. One of my best friends was getting married there in 2017. So I had been elected for about a year. Mind you, when I was elected, there was a huge vendetta because of Chief McNeil. He's such a great chief, but the former chief was mad because he was selected and appointed to the chief, and he was from out of town. The former chief wanted his boy to be the chief, and he didn't get it, which is fine. The guy was fine with it. But that chief wanted his way because he wanted to control the town. So George, what was I saying? So San Diego. So there was a huge vendetta, and I was kind of naive to it, but Dan and I had this huge trip to San Diego planned because I was finally, for the first time in my life, taking a date to a wedding with someone I actually care about. So and Dan hadn't flown on a plane, again, he's an alien, in 20 years. So I was like, this is a big deal. Dan had just won his custody battle. It was a big deal. His lawyer was like, yes, you can do this. This is what you do, blah, blah, blah. We had notes. We had lists. We had the house cleaned before we left. The kids were 13 and 16, almost 14 and 17. By discretion, you can leave kids home alone at 11.
Not that you would,
but all the neighbors knew. They have our numbers. They watch out for the house. And we were like, all right, we left food. Dan labeled all the food. We had a phone list starting with 911, like who to call. We had a dog walking schedule because Dan and I had 3 dogs. We still have 3 dogs. We even on the Tuesday had the chief of police walking our dogs. Like, that is not normal.
He offered.
Yeah.
It was nice of him because, he knew that we haven't been away in a while. And part of the itinerary that I had written up for
the kids.
The trip and the kids, they had plenty of money. They had cash. They had a refrigerator full of food, alarm system, neighbors watching diligently.
Yes, ultra
uncles,
protected.
Everybody was around making sure that the kids were safe. And they were on a routine, so they knew that I'd go to school, they got on the bus.
Yeah, they were very self-sufficient. My mom was right down the road. Like,
even if we still go away today, my daughter still comes and watches the dogs, and she takes care of them for us.
Yeah.
So it's not it was something that was taught at a young age, and I knew as a parent that they could handle that.
Absolutely.
And I was not concerned at all at what was going to happen to them at that point because I knew that they would be able to handle. They had plenty of fail safes.
Yeah, right. So, and you even had proof in writing, approval from your ex-wife and your mother, the grandmother, to one of the grandmothers, to that it was okay, that the schedule was okay, and everything was fine. Even though she just lost the custody battle, she was fine with it. So Dan and I fly out to San Diego. Now, mind you, I have an app on my phone that tells me if someone's calling me when I'm in the air, because I get notified, but I obviously can't answer the phone. I got none of those on the flight. So we land, no voicemails, everything's cool. We go to our hotel. We're in San Diego. I meet up with some friends, like, let's meet up, whatever. Before we leave the hotel to meet up with the friends, we check our cameras, like, how's the house? How are the kids? And we see 2 police officers from my town in my kitchen. So Dan and I were like, what the fuck is going on?
So I made the phone call and I said, "What the fuck?"
To
guys?"
Cameron.
To Cameron, and I said, "What's going on?" And he, I have to tell you something. I said, "Okay, well, fucking tell me." And it was, I got in trouble for chewing gum,
Chewing gum
and he
in the
didn't-
middle school.
They could have called. He could have had his mother sign the disciplinary note or whatever, but he didn't. And he knew that I was going away, so he was going to try to buy some time. Well,
He bragged that he was alone
he
for a week,
yeah.
which he wasn't. But
He wasn't alone, but he said that, "Oh well, my dad's not home. I'm alone at home, and I can't have this signed."
now, mind you, they all know who I am. They know that everything's great. They know, they trust us, but they didn't realize that I was Dan's girlfriend and that it was in my household.
Yeah, and
The school I'm talking about.
I mean the school, the principal. I don't know if you want to say names, but
No.
the names. So we. She even said it at one point that if she had known it was us, not that that matters.
I have that email.
It doesn't matter. Like if, but then she wouldn't have done that. It was something that she just did daily. It
Like
became
candy out
routine.
candy, which
Yeah.
is horrible.
And do a
But
wellness
anyway.
check, do a wellness check, do a wellness
Yeah.
check.
So she brought Dan's son into the principal's office and was like concerned, "You're home alone. What's going on?" Now, Cameron has nice clothes. He's clean. Like, there's no issue. They were like, "Oh, well, why are you home alone?" And he kind of bragged, like, "Look at me. I'm home alone. I'm cool." He's almost 14 at the time. And the principal was like, "Just call the cops and do a wellness check. And I'm leaving for the day." So she hands this wellness check out like it's fucking candy. No big deal. Just gonna ruin lives. And while I go home for the day, because it's almost 4:00. And
But her intentions were, even though you say ruin
no,
lives,
no, 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 no.
I know. I don't. I have to say that it became routine for her to the point where she said,
Which
"Oh,
is horrible.
yeah, it's horrible," but her intentions were, "I have to cover my ass and make sure that if something happened to this kid, I handed out a wellness check."
Right, but she didn't even call. I was the second one to call. Mind you, I said I have that app on my phone when people call me. I said I was on the list to call. I was the second one before Cameron's mother. And before the grandparents. So she didn't even call me. She didn't call anyone. She didn't leave voicemails, nothing. And so I emailed. We see the cops in the kitchen and we're like, "What the fuck?" So Cameron admits to the gum. So I call the chief of police, Chief McNeil, and I'm like, "What is going on?" He didn't even know they were in the kitchen. Like, he didn't even know. They should have told him they were in his boss's kitchen. But they didn't. But anyway, he talked to them and said, "Don't worry about it. The sergeant this evening the sergeant, which is now the chief, which is a horrible person. I'm not saying his name. I don't know. That will get me in trouble. Chief McNeil's like, "The sergeant's just going to write a report when he gets in at 8:00 and no big deal. Go about your vacation." Like, all right, go about my vacation, meet the friends, go out, blah, blah, blah. 5 hours later, come home. And there's a missed call from Somerset Police. I'm like, it's been 5 hours. What happened now? So sure enough, this sergeant was on duty. Instead of writing the report and putting it away, because he knew there were no issues, he decides to escalate it and to say that we need to change our flights and that Dan needs to fly home. And he called it a fait accompli and was opportunistic and called Dan's ex-wife, not knowing that Dan just won his custody battle. And she was opportunistic and said, "Well, I didn't really want them to go." So, of course. And they called and woke up Dan's kids to make sure they were okay. And Dan's kids were like, "We're in bed. We have MCAS tomorrow." I think they missed it because they woke them up. It was so late. So they were pissed. They're like, Fuck, I'm fine. They forced the kids to go to Dan's parents in Berkeley. They woke them up to go to Dan's parents when they were fine. They had to drive 12 minutes. They had to get picked up at like 1 a.m. by Dan's mom just to sleep with his parents. And this sergeant was doing it to just stick it up our ass because he hated the police chief. And he still does. Mm-hmm. He hated Chief McNeil. And he was with the other one, the former chief, that had a vendetta and wanted him to look bad.
Yeah, he was going through, trying to
using me as a
take
pawn.
me, to use you as a pawn, go through you to get to the chief.
Yeah.
And his plan failed.
Right. So Dan and I collectively lost our minds. We were absolutely hysterical, crying, screaming. Surprised we didn't get kicked out of the hotel. I can't even tell you. I had my first and only nervous breakdown in my life. I couldn't breathe. Dan had to change his flight. Dan's like, I can't lose my kids. I just got custody and I can't lose my kids. So we changed his flight to the next morning. We just landed for this fucking wedding of my best friend, which I was the maid of honor. I'm like, oh, it's the one time in 15 years that I'm bringing a boyfriend to a wedding, and now he has to fly home because my fucking sergeant decides to be an asshole. And he said, you know what? You have to change your flight, and I'm going to call DCF.
Yeah, he called DCF on the whole situation because he wasn't comfortable.
He's lying, but
yeah,
anyway.
He was lying. My kids being almost 17 and almost 14. So close, a few months away. And I felt comfortable enough to leave them alone. But that didn't matter. They're my kids.
They didn't even know that Dan just got full custody. So we sent them the proof. And they were like, oh, well, we don't care. And then we sent them the proof that we had approval in writing from Dan's mom and his ex-wife and all this stuff. And they were like, well, we're going to call it a fait accompli.
It didn't matter what we produced
exactly.
as evidence. They already had it on their mind, that he had it in his mind that he was trying to use you to get to the police chief to make him look as bad as possible.
Yes.
And that's what he was trying to achieve.
Yep. And that principal should never have done a wellness check, because this is what it led to. Because a wellness check is for actual people that need a wellness check that we did not need. Our house was spotless and locked and had an alarm and had everyone and their mother looking over it. And by law, the lawyer said it was fine. So like the mother said it was fine. Like everyone's, so they just were opportunistic and twisted it around. We lost our minds. So in the morning, we didn't sleep, but in the morning we were getting ready to go to the airport to bring Dan because I had to stay for the wedding at least. We cut our whole trip short. And DCF called.
Yeah, I was 5 minutes away from walking out the door to go to the airport to fly back home while Holly stayed there in San Diego. And the phone rang.
A day after we landed.
Yep. And the phone rang, and it was DCF.
And what did they say?
And they said, well, we want to talk to you about the situation going on. Someone said you're home, whatever. And we exchanged a little bit of more information. And then she said, well, I just want to let you know that you don't need to leave. We're going to make sure that the kids have a place right now, just to be safe. And I ended up not having to fly home because they said I did nothing wrong.
Exactly.
And that was the key. When she said you did not violate anything, you did not do anything wrong, there was nothing open against you, you don't have to worry.
They knew it was political.
They knew it was political, and they run into this all the time. It's usually some sort of vendetta, or I'm going to do a revenge call. And that's exactly what this was from a police officer.
Mm-hmm. And guess what? No, I won't say that. We just have something in our back pocket with proof. I'm not going to reveal my cards, but we just know that there's more to it, and it is all political, and it's really fucking bad. Mm-hmm. So that happened to me and Dan. So we rebooked the flight, spent more money changing the flight again, kind of back to where it was, but still cut this trip a little bit short, not as short as before. Got to enjoy the wedding, but then that Sunday, I was told that there was a letter coming to the town, which is me, as a selectman, and my board, and the town administrator, that there was like a 14-page letter that was sent. No. That was later. During the trip, there was a 3-page letter that was sent to the town, which is me, and it was saying that I needed to apologize publicly because I was using my role as a selectman, like abusing my power. Because I posted on Facebook that something happened to me and I was devastated, and it had to do with the police chief. I mean, it had to do with the police department, and I'm gonna look into it when I get home, and it shouldn't happen to anyone. And that's all I said. So I had tons of support. So they knew, the sergeant knew that he was in big trouble, because I had 3 to 4 on this thread, and people reaching out to help, including state reps and senators and whatnot, former senators, etc. How can I help? How can I help? So that he freaked out. He had the union lawyer contacted to say that I was abusing, because he knew he was about to be investigated, and he got ahead of it.
Yeah,
So he went behind the union. The union lawyer opined on the fact that the town should be embarrassed and ashamed. And I don't know what real lawyer opines on emotion, but that was like so unprofessional. But anyway, he opined on the emotions of how someone should feel, and then proceeded to say that he's going to watch over myself and Chief McNeil for any retaliatory action, which means that any disciplinary action, which was warranted, would have been looked at by the union as retaliatory. So he knew by doing that tied our hands behind our backs. So we couldn't do an investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we could prove that we had to do the investigation, he didn't do it. And there was nothing anyone could do. And I felt helpless. I was like, I just feel violated. Like, did I just get raped?
It was violated. It was definitely a feeling of violation.
Yeah, so then so that letter went out. I cried to my town administrator. I cried to my town lawyer. And I'm like, what the fuck? And they were like, Holly, we have a feeling this isn't about you. But whatever. So then 6 weeks later, I think it was 6 weeks, a new 14-page letter came out saying they didn't think I needed to publicly apologize anymore for whatever reason. But lo and behold, of course, the chief's contract was about to be renewed. So they were writing this letter coinciding with the chief's contract about to be renewed, which they didn't want renewed, these assholes. So they wrote this 14-page letter going back into this incident with a timestamp recall of all the events, which was clearly written by another lawyer, not the union lawyer. And I'm like, I can't read this. So I call my town administrator. I'm like, in tears. I'm like, I can't read this. I'm like, I just can't do it. What does it say? He's like, I'll just say it's not about you.
Yeah. Once again, it was trying to make the current chief look bad, so that he wouldn't get his contract renewed.
Right. I left the part out where, when they said that night that they were calling DCF, it's now 10 p.m. in San Diego. It's 1 a.m. in Somerset. I called that principal and woke her up and screamed at her. I'm like, you started this. You should have never done a wellness check. She's like, I didn't know. I'm like, you didn't know. Like, you didn't think. More like it. Mm-hmm. You're ruining lives. And then I called George and I woke him up and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, what the fuck? He was so pissed. They were supposed to call him and they didn't. So he was pissed. So anyway,
I want to add that that sergeant on the police force at the time didn't call his own chief.
He didn't.
He referred to
the former chief,
another party to make that decision, and they said, well, this coincides with our what we're trying to achieve. Should I do this? And he said, absolutely. Therefore, that sergeant went ahead and did that to try to get to George through me.
Yep. And Dan confirmed that by asking the former chief to meet, which they did.
He threw a bunch of mass legislation and mass general laws at me, and it didn't apply to me because my kids were old enough, and I just didn't believe a word he was saying. But then I had an epiphany, and I realized what he was trying to do.
Yeah. You didn't describe it that way to me before. It's interesting to hear that take. So, yeah, he just twisting and grasping at straws to try to get to George.
Yeah, that was the most direct route. Was what I just told you was the most direct route.
Like sickly obsessed with, and George was such a good chief that he turned that department around, and the morale was so great. Now it's in the shitter, but it was so great. It's in the shitter because that same sergeant was appointed after they had a vendetta. 2 bad people got into office. I resigned. I said, fuck this. I know what they're going to do. And those 2 selectmen appointed that sergeant as the chief right now, and removed George, ruined his livelihood, took it all away from him.
Oh, he had an outstanding career.
33 years of a spotless record. Very well respected chief across the entire state, in the entire county.
Yeah, they just made up stories about him to try to make it look bad.
The same former chief made up stories that he went to a local restaurant, was falling off bar stools, and he would try to call me and convince me. And I'm like, dude, I don't believe a word you're saying. Give me the proof. He never gave me the proof. He just ran his fucking little mouth. And I might end up dead someday, but I don't care. So he just doesn't care. So that was one of the things that Dan had to deal with as my girlfriend. Dan's dealing with this divorce. We're on a vacation, and now I'm being used as a pawn, and his kids are being used as a pawn. I'm not even the legal guardian of his kids, and I'm getting DCF called. It's insane.
It was not fun, but it's all in the past. The water under the bridge at this point.
Thank God.
Yeah. Doesn't make me feel any different. That's the uniqueness of our relationship and me as your boyfriend. I think. I don't hold a grudge. I don't say you put me through this, or this happened to me because you did this. I try to keep things unconditional. I try. And I don't have any regrets. No regrets.
Thank God. So you wouldn't change anything? I'm so grateful to hear this. Dan has expressed that before, but I've never heard him describe it that way. I'm trying to see what else we have in our notes.
Oh, it says it's almost time for bed.
We had another crazy time. We woke up. Well, we were sleeping. No, you had just come home and you were going to bed you had just gone home from your shift, I think. And you were going to bed, and it was 9 a.m. And I was just waking up. And it was a Saturday. And right around 9:30, you were falling asleep, and I was about to actually get out of bed. And you looked at your phone because we had cameras everywhere. That was the other thing. We had cameras everywhere.
We heard the doorbell.
And I didn't hear it, but Dan looked at the camera after he heard it and was like, "Are you expecting a guest?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" "No." And he's like, "Do you know this woman?" He shows me the camera in his phone, and I'm like, "No." I've never seen that woman in my life. And then we just waited, and then she left. So I'm like, "Oh, thank God." Well, then we see her talking to our neighbor, and we're like, "Oh my God, she knows our neighbor." So later on, after she really left, we asked our neighbor, "Who is that?" Well, it turns out it was our neighbor up the street. And this woman, she had a water main break, which has nothing to do with the selectmen. Okay, fine. And she called the water department on a Saturday morning. Was it during COVID?
No.
No. So she called the water department off the hook, and the water department knows exactly what they're doing. So they did whatever they had to do. But at the time, I think they couldn't answer the phone. I can't remember what it was. So she called the fire department. The fire department handled it, got the water department involved. Everyone fixed it. But she still ended up, so my neighbor was like, you need, that's so-and-so up the street. Let's call her Mary. Her name's not Mary. So Mary up the street, she's one of our neighbors, and we were like, oh, we didn't know. Okay, fine. So I ended up looking up her phone number to see if she's okay. Like, I didn't know she had a water main break. I didn't know anything. So I'm like, oh, I just want to make sure she's okay. So I call her, and again, it's like 10 in the morning. And she answers, and I explain I'm Holly McNamara, blah, blah, blah. And she goes into this whole story about her water main break and how she called the water pump. She doesn't know why they're not answering. And I said, well, they can't always answer. They're out in the field or blah, blah, blah. She's like, well, they have to fix this. And, and she goes on this whole story. And I'm trying to explain to her, like, there was something major they were dealing with at the time. I can't remember. And she was like, I pay taxes and I deserve this special treatment and blah. And so I called the fire department and they came out and they fixed it. And this is what they said. I'm like, wait, ma'am. So they fixed it, right? Yeah, it's fixed. And I'm like, so what do you need from me? Oh, nothing. I just needed to yell and tell you, like, I need to be answered, and they're not answering their phone. I'm like, ma'am, it's all handled. It's Saturday. Don't ever come to my house on a Saturday again. So, like,
well, not in that manner. I mean, I just, the whole approach was wrong.
Her whole approach.
Her whole approach.
Yeah.
Whether or not we were still getting out of bed or I was going to bed, it could have been handled better, I think.
It was awful.
It was terrible. And it was just another one of those things that just makes you say,
what am I doing with this girl?
Yeah.
So what about, did I forget anything? Do you want to add to that story?
Yeah, there wasn't much more to that one.
Yeah. So what else? Like, do you have any advice for anyone that's going to run for office and for their significant other?
Yes, I do. It's going to be a lot more enjoyable if you're a team. If you're arm in arm, you tackle it head on together. And if a significant other, whether it be a man or a woman, it's going to be so much better if you can come to terms with the things that you're going to encounter, and you go at it together head on. If you resist, if you get if there's animosity, you start to get jealous, it makes things 10 times worse. And if you value your sanity, which I didn't have much of at the time, but all kidding aside, I thought to myself that, and I still think that way. You're nuts. I sometimes I just don't, and we yell at each other, we call each other nuts too, but it was just the better way to approach difficult times, and I'll always be by your side.
Thank you. No, honest to God, Senator Rodericks was completely correct. Like, I would not have survived without Dan. I really would not have. And thank God, the past 2 to 3 years were really hard, and I feel like I've had a breakthrough, and I'm through onto the other side, and I'm in a better place now. But I mean, he had to see me cry day after day. every morning I'd wake up crying. There were days I'd wake up actually crying, and
That was because you felt strongly about what you were doing, and I could see that. You waking up feeling that way, seeing a message that it wasn't because you were, you felt threatened or anything like that. You just felt like you cared so much that you wanted to help.
yeah.
And you didn't like the disparagement. You didn't like that.
No, it was shitty. It's so shitty.
Some of the messages were just shit. Good
Yeah,
word.
yeah. One guy, he was referencing a tweet I made about. It was a metaphor for wearing a condom. I used the word condom. I can't remember what the metaphor was. It had to do with a movie. And one of the comments on Facebook, like people were trying to say that I shouldn't have used the word condom and it was trashy. And I'm like, no, I was quoting something. Like it was a metaphor. But anyway, this guy was like, yeah, it's too bad her dad didn't wear one. That's when I actually cried. Like, that was the first time I cried. And that was the night before the election. And I was like, ugh.
I remember who said that.
I do too. And 16. It was so fucked up. It's just a fucked up thing to say. Like, I wish you never lived. Like, what? Who are you? I don't even know who you are, sir.
Can't even pick you out in a crowd.
No, who the fuck are you?
And it was because his boy didn't get into a police chief position or whatnot. It
was before my election too, so it was like, what?
It's not something you say to someone.
It's fucked up. But that shit continued. There are websites about me. I am just a small local politician. I'm not even in politics right now. But there are people still talking about me. Like, thank you for being obsessed. But poor Dan has to witness this shit. But now I'm eternally grateful because he's by my side, he's my best friend, and I would not have survived. And he cooks good food. Mm-hmm. And gives me wine. And I have to give a shout out to our friend, China Lake Mai Tai. That's what I was drinking. It was a to-go thing from COVID. Very good. I think we're gonna wrap this up.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff out.
We did.
We've been harboring it for a long time.
A long time. We could go on and get into all the nitty-gritty details and the weeds, and we'll have another episode at some point. But
yeah, it's too much. It's too congested if you really get into the details. But that's the overview of it.
Yeah.
And it was thorough.
Yeah.
It's after 1 a.m. So,
I hope so.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening, and reach out, subscribe. thesaltgrain.com has all the links to YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. The video is on Spotify only and YouTube only, but I suggest subscribing to Spotify because it has both. And it's a podcast platform where YouTube's not so much. That's all right.
Subscribe, and I promise I'll be back.
Yeah, Dan will be back. And Spotify has polls and stuff, and I'm going to be putting out some polls, and you can interact. And at some point, I might go live and have callers and stuff like that. But I really hope you all stay tuned. Thank you to my boyfriend, my brave boyfriend, for being my guest. And welcome to the jungle. All right, everybody. We will talk to you soon. Thank you. Good night. The Salt Green is a podcast where politicians stop pandering and start getting real. This podcast is me, Holly McNamara, various co-hosts and guests. Our post-production is done by Pixella Films. For more content and all social media links, you can find us on thesaltgrain.com. Thank you for joining us while we take you into our world of public service, and be sure, as always, to take everything with a grain of salt.